Is there a little bit of applause there after he introduces me? No, there isn't. And I realize for a lot of people out there, the closet liberals who listen but don't dare tell anyone because they're trying to learn something during the course of the day, they would not be applauding. Someone might actually see them do it. I would think that. By the way, if you've not looked at it, I have a column again today in the Magic Valley Times News. If you've not yet looked at it, you take a look at it. If you look at it online, you'll notice last week, I believe my column was the second most commented on item in the paper for the week. If you look at the comments, nobody uses their real name because, well, if you're a liberal, you're not very brave. Number two, you can be the same guy and use half a dozen names and pretend to be half a dozen people. That happened with Rush Limbaugh a number of years ago. We had all of these people around the country who were supposedly emailing advertisers and radio stations saying, "You've got to get Rush off the air because he's hateful and he doesn't believe in liberalism, which is a self-evident truth. Therefore, he must go before he pollutes the ears of Americans who aren't as smart as I am and end up listening to him and get corrupted." Then the fellow who runs the premier radio networks did some research into all of this, and they found out it was just 10 people nationwide, each, though, using hundreds of identities in order to try to make themselves look like an army. Go figure. Want to thank you for joining me this morning. Bill Colley, top story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. There is a vice presidential debate tonight. That means I can go to bed early. Come on, let's be honest about this. Nobody cares about Tim Kaine. And even though I think Mike Pence is a wonderful guy, nobody really cares about watching those two fellas have a debate. They may be very good at it, but they'll be the typical standard fare of politicians. In other words, well, I'd like to mention that my opponent tonight has been roasting dogs in his attic, and he's been doing it for many, many years, and the Republicans, of course, are well known for harming puppies. Well, I'd like to point out that my opponent over there on the liberal side, of course, has been killing babies and assisting in abortions over the last 20 years as he's been serving in the U.S. Senate. Well, I'd like to mention that my distinguished opponent actually puts barbecue sauce on those dogs. This is the type of thing that you'll get. It's the typical Washington dance. It's unlike any debate involving Donald Trump, where you don't know what's coming. I mean, Trump is the unexpected. But we'll get the same old boilerplate politics tonight because these guys have come up through a political system that says, don't sneeze in the wrong direction because someone will claim you sneezed in the wrong direction, and that'll hurt you at the ballot box. Trump yesterday was at a rally, and he was pointing out there's a big story, the claim that Donald Trump is lying when he says he did not support the war in Iraq. Now, a lot of Republicans did, yours truly. But the claim is Donald Trump is lying and that he actually did because he said it on the Howard Stern show. Howard Stern took to the air on his program yesterday and lambasted, if you prefer that pronunciation, the Clinton News Network, known as CNN, for reporting that Stern had called Trump a liar. Stern echoed what Trump said in last week's debate. Stern does a comedy show. They were on a comedy riff when Donald Trump said it's like saying that someone who was on Saturday Night Live, and I heard this is not original, I heard it on TV last night, but that if someone was on Saturday Night Live as a guest, a politician, that then 10 years from now you would say, well, in the sketch about the bumblebees, do you know what he said? Folks, it's play acting, okay? So Stern took CNN to task yesterday for that. Trump, meanwhile, though, has been a little bit what you might call more philosophical about it. This is the man speaking at a rally to a number of his supporters right after a woman had yelled out, "I'm praying for you."
And I'm praying for you, and I love you. Great people. Now I get the whole hero thing. Now I get it. But that is why I have left private business to go into public life. If you would have ever told me that I was going to be doing this. Now, had I known I was going to be doing this, I would have commenced with certain television interviews, radio interviews. I would have said things slightly differently. And I wouldn't have had as good a time in life and as much fun in life, but it would have made my life as a politician a little bit easier, right? And you know, these people, holier than thou, they never say anything around the breakfast room table, do they? They never. They never do. Bill and Hillary never say anything like this around the breakfast. Can you imagine what they say? Well, they talk about deplorables and irredeemables, right? They talk about that. You're deplorable, you're irredeemable. I think irredeemable might be worse if you think. Everyone talks about, oh, deplorable. These are the greatest people in this room and many other rooms like it. We've seen hundreds of thousands of people. These are the greatest people.
Donald Trump speaking before a crowd of enthusiastic supporters yesterday. We still don't know. Hillary Clinton obviously got some sort of bounce out of last week's debate. That's what all the pollsters are saying, but it wasn't a very big bounce, which means that there's still a lot of wiggle room between now and Election Day before you actually see something akin to a real idea of who's going to win this thing. But I do leave open the possibility that Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. I'm going to check my telephones out for a moment. We have a call. Can I point out you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, 736-0300. Caller, you're on the air. What's the warning?
Oh, Bill, yesterday I heard in a week verified with a tax professor from Syracuse who's writing a book on Trump and his tax deals. You know that he hasn't paid taxes since 1977, and after he bankrupted all his dealings in Atlantic City, he turned around and publicly sold stocks on them. And who got stuck with the bill? The other people.
Well, guys like you who go around, who spend your life just driving a car for some car dealer's wife, you don't make enough money to pay taxes. So who's more productive to this society? Trump, who's employing thousands of people, or you, who's just basically saying, where to, ma'am? Tell me. Nope, I guess not. Want to thank him for the effort, though. That mean old Donald Trump. Business people do that. That's how business works. Stuart Varney explaining this last night on the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News. I want to thank the caller for the setup.
I say, turn it to your advantage. What he did was he took this huge loss, $916 million, discounted it against his future income, therefore paid no income tax, we think, in a number of years. He should turn that around and say, look how I bounced back. Yeah, I took one big loss, but you should admire me. He shouldn't have to say that, but admire the man for an extraordinary bounce back. And after all, he only did what millions of Americans have done. I did that. I took a hit on a house that I owned in the 1980s, lost a lot of money, took a tax loss in a couple of years in the future against my future income. Millions of Americans do this. It's part of our tax code. It's part of our way of getting back after you've made a big loss.
What about the argument that Secretary Clinton is making, and she made it today, that if you don't pay any taxes because you have these write-offs and these losses, you don't really contribute much to the defense of America or the infrastructure or the well-being of the country?
He was contributing to America by regrowing his business, which now employs thousands of people and works all around the world. I think that's a better contribution to the economy and to America than pumping money into the government, which wastes an awful lot of it.
Or as Brett Stevens says today, who's not a Trump fan, but says at the Wall Street Journal, you could point out the fact that some people have left public office, or at least their husband left public office, and they turned that into a cash cow for their own personal gain. Which one of these is a worse American? I guess are we so jealous that people have actually made money in life any longer? I guess if you have no skills or no talent like the previous caller, if you're a bum, then you're angry because you think somebody else who's worked hard, maybe 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to build their business, somehow owes it to you. I don't get the thinking on that one at all. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air at 8:16 on Top Story. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. You need to tell our drive-by friend that before he starts throwing stones from a glass house, he needs to look at all of his idols on the left that are way wealthy and some more wealthy than Trump, that use all the same tax codes but sit there on a stump and say how everybody should pay more taxes. Nobody's stopping them from using those tax codes. Nobody's stopping them from writing a check and paying more money in like they say everybody else should. But they don't. They're all talk, no walk.
And that was an argument, thank you, that was made about Warren Buffett the other day. That here's Buffett, who's far, far wealthier. What is he, like second or third richest man in the world? There's Carlos Slim from Mexico. We might throw in, there's a Chinese billionaire too as well. We might throw him in there now. So maybe there's 4 or 5 guys. Bill Gates is in there, but Buffett's worth about $70 billion. If Trump is worth $10 billion, you do the math. Well, okay, let's explain that to liberals. Warren Buffett is worth 7 times as much as Donald Trump. If Buffett would like to pay more taxes, then Buffett can write a check to the Treasury. He doesn't need somebody coming by with a fire and knout from the IRS forcing him to do it. 817, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. It's 43. Pat Buchanan really summed this all up well today about all of the forces arrayed against Donald Trump and why they happen to be arrayed against him. And remember, the media is now in collusion. When they break the law or encourage people to break the law, they don't do that very often with Democrats when they're looking to get into people's backgrounds, only Republicans. We demand fairness. We don't get it. But this is Pat Buchanan saying their goals are 2. First, make Trump unacceptable as an agent of change. Second, keep the people distracted from their determination to rid America of the incompetent and corrupt ruling class that controls this capital city. Of course, he's a native of Washington and still lives there. Consider but a few of the disasters that the establishment does not want discussed or debated, or the American people thinking about when they head for the polls. On behalf of these special interests, he writes, U.S. politicians made the People's Republic of China the greatest manufacturing power on earth and halted the traditional annual rise in wages of our working men and women. Beijing is now using the wealth compiled to build up their air, naval, and missile forces to push us out of Asia and back across the Pacific. Then there is the illegal invasion of America and Europe by the impoverished masses. He says, unrivaled since the last days of the Roman Empire, this invasion has Americans pleading for a security wall on their border, propelled by Britain's exit from the EU, and this could yet cause a breakup of Europe. What's at stake here ultimately? Western civilization. There you go. Trump is new to national politics, yet with all the mistakes he's made and all the savagery of the media attacks upon him, he is still remarkably very much in the race for president. Do America's reigning elites, he concludes with this, believe that Trump's movement is but a passing phase? Do they believe that the rise of the populist and nationalist parties across Europe is but a seasonal epidemic of the flu that will die out, after which we can all get back to building the New World Order or Bush 1 and Barack Obama? I think not. So Hillary Clinton could win, folks. But the next 4 years, if she continues to try to say she's going to bring millions of dangerous refugees into our country and feed them at your expense while they plot to kill you, or if we're going to have people who say we've got to eliminate the border so we can bring more Democrats here, your life is not going to get any better. Got that? We've got more coming up on this subject in just a moment. On Top Story, it's 8:20. I was just sitting here chatting with a man who's going to be our guest this morning on the radio. Actually, he's going to stick around too for a portion of the next hour because Steve Millington is in the studio with me right now, but we have a very exciting guest coming up just after 9 o'clock news. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Also wanted to mention tomorrow morning, we're going to have one of the guests from Tripp Family Medicine in studio with us between 8:30 and 9 o'clock and talking about medical issues. Just want to remind you, Tripp Family Medicine is still in the market for new patients, and they can often see you. We say often, stress often, not always, but often see you on the very same day if you wake up with a medical issue. And the office is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. And I do want to thank the office and its staff for the early birthday present that they sent my way. A few days early, but it's the first. And it's the first card I got. So I'm pleased about that. Steve, we've got a caller with us already.
Well, yeah, all right. Let's talk to him. Good morning, Bill. How are you?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to call about the media. I know that in Idaho, it matters that we vote. But when it comes to the presidential election, usually it doesn't, which is a terrible thing to say to anybody. But I noticed over the weekend as I was watching football and I would watch for the weather, whether or not it was the stations in Boise, the TV stations, or the KMBT here. They were running, derogatory ads. I mean, stories about Trump. And last night on Channel 6 out of Boise, how LeBron James, the guy said she was celebrating that LeBron James had endorsed her, and then he turned around and...
Well, that's because LeBron James is really talented at bouncing a ball on a barn floor, so he must know what he's talking about.
Well, exactly, but then they turned around and just beat what out of Trump, and they did it all weekend. Even the weekend anchors on KMBT, who probably, forgive me, don't know diddly. They just read from a teleprompter. You'd like to ask them if they know anything, but it doesn't matter, I guess. And then yesterday, during the day, I was listening to Fox and this station at the top of the hour. And all day long, Fox beat the, out of Trump. And I thought, fair and balanced, my aching butt. And so, you see what I'm saying? Are they desperate? You get tired of being anxious, you see? And, Mel Brooks had a movie once, and there was a song, and it says, high anxiety, you win. And you see what I'm saying? We just get to the point where we're so sick of being mistreated as the people, and we feel like Trump cares, but the media is not going to let us make a decision. I'm going to hang up. Thanks.
Thank you. A lot of those 22-year-old reporters, keep in mind, they're all making in television here in Idaho $17,500 a year, so they're socialists just because they think somebody else, mommy and daddy aren't taking care of them any longer. Another caller with us. Caller, you're on the air with Steve Millington and Bill Colley at 827.
Well, the big picture is that the elitists in both parties support a one-world socialist order. And, of course, that comes from Tragedy and Hope, the book by Carol Quigley. Carol Quigley was Bill Clinton's mentor. And so if you look at the big picture, this really explains what's going on. And of course, the big media is totally in the tank. They're Hillary's campaign. She wouldn't even have to go out and make any appearances. The news media is taking care of it for her. But this is the real serious thing, is that we have to realize the big picture is the United Nations is going to be our Lord and Master unless we stop it, whether it's Agenda 21, the refugee program, in Common Core. All that stuff is coming right down through the EPA, our education departments. And I'd like Steve to comment about that, because I think people don't realize the serious nature of what we're getting ourselves into, this quagmire of internationalism, of elitism, and the fact that they want a one-world government where very few elitists would control the rest of us in this global plantation, and we would be literally slaves.
On that note, we've got a break in about a little under a minute. I thank you for the call, and quick note on that. He brought up something, too, and it's just a little nugget from this morning stuck into my mind. And we'll get to Steve here in the next segment. But I just read this morning where there are two versions of when Social Security, the trust fund, goes broke. One is in 2029. The other is coming up in 2031, depending on which one you believe. This country is in for a heck of a lot of hurt ahead. And I am 11 years and 6 days away from that earliest collection of that Social Security. So I'm a little concerned about all of that, too. The fact of the matter is, people are looking for someone to be a savior. Don't know if anybody's out there quite with that. That title may not be appropriate, but we've got more with Steve Millington coming up in a couple of minutes. It's 42. Bill Colley with you as well this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Quickly, who do we have coming up after 9 o'clock?
His name is Dale Ewerson.
Running for Senate?
He's running for state Senate in District 26, and that includes Gooding County and Camas County and Blaine County and
we're praying for him.
Lincoln County. And he's running against a very strong candidate, Democrat candidate.
We got more on that coming up in a few minutes on KLIX.